The silent strategist, the boardroom, was too quiet. That kind of quiet that isn't peaceful. It's the kind that screams with judgment, with doubt, with people waiting for someone to fail. Sundar Pichai sat at the far end of the long oak table, a simple notebook in front of him, untouched. He wasn't taking notes. He wasn't speaking. He was listening. Opposite him sat Martin Hawley, a seasoned investor from New York, flown in especially for this pitch. He was slick, loud, and confident, in a way that often danced on the line between charisma and arrogance. He leaned back in his leather chair, a smirk on his face, clearly amused by what he'd just heard. "So let me get this straight," Martin chuckled, his voice echoing off the glass walls. "You're telling me your plan to rework the Android ecosystem will not only outpace Apple, but also redefine the next 10 years of mobile computing." He didn't ask because he was curious. He asked because he thought it was ridiculous. A few chuckles rose from others around the table, executives in sharp suits, product managers with anxious eyes, and even a couple of interns seated against the wall taking notes. Sundar remained, still, not reacting to the laughter, not defending himself immediately. That quiet made Martin lean forward, eyes narrowing. "You're serious?" He said again, now more intrigued than dismissive. Sundar finally looked up. His eyes weren't angry. They weren't even defensive. They were calm, thoughtful, like someone who had spent weeks, maybe months, putting the pieces together. Sundar said, softly, his voice steady. "Because it's not just about the phone. It's about the world people will live in 5 years from now. Most people are planning for today." "I'm planning for what they don't even see yet?" Silence. Again, this time heavier. Not mocking, but waiting. The kind of silence that hangs before something important. Martin looked around the room as if expecting someone else to object. No one did. A few looked down at their papers, pretending to reread Sundar's strategic plan. Others looked out the window, uncomfortable with the tension. What no one said aloud, but what everyone felt was that Sundar didn't speak. Often in these meetings, he observed, he listened. And when he finally did speak, it was never out of impulse. It was always because he was sure, but Martin wasn't impressed. He stood up, adjusted his cufflinks, and walked to the large digital screen at the front of the room. He tapped the corner of the presentation and scrolled through Sundar's slides with a flick of his hand. "You know what I think?" Martin said without turning around. "I think you're playing it safe. You want to build something for the future, but you're still using today's tools, too slow, too cautious, too academic." He turned, facing Sundar directly. "You don't win by playing not to lose. You win by taking risks, bold ones." The words landed like stones. Most people in the room nodded, at least subtly. Martin's approach was aggressive, but it sounded right. It sounded brave. Sundar didn't flinch. "That's the mistake people make," Sundar replied gently. "They confuse noise with courage. Sometimes the most radical move is the one that looks the quietest." Martin laughed, an actual, full laugh. Then he sat back down and folded his arms. "All right then," he said. "Convince me. Tell me why your way this. Gentle revolution matters. More than mine." Sundar opened his notebook for the first time. He didn't read from it. He simply tapped a corner of the page with one finger, as if grounding himself. And then he spoke, not like someone giving a presentation, but like someone telling a story. "When I was 10, he began, my father bought a rotary phone for our house in Chennai. It was the first one on our street. I still remember neighbors lining up outside our home just to make one call. People treated that phone like it was magic, because to them, it connected them to their loved ones hundreds of miles away. But for me, it was something else." He paused. It was proof that technology could level the playing field, that no matter where you came from, you could reach the world. Now the room was fully focused. Not one person shifted in their seat. Sundar continued, "I didn't grow up with wealth or connections. I grew up with limited choices. So when I finally had the chance to create, I decided I'd spend my life building technology that gave more people more choices. Not just the wealthy, not just the powerful. Everyone." He gestured to the screen without needing to look at it. This isn't just a strategy to sell more phones. This is about making the operating system of the future flexible enough to power schools in villages, smart homes in cities, medical centers in rural areas. It's about designing an ecosystem where updates don't exclude the poor, where innovation doesn't leave anyone behind. Martin shifted in his seat, the confidence in his posture softening just a little. What you call slow and cautious, Sundar continued, I call inclusive and sustainable. We're not just playing a quarterly game. We're building something that can last. The room was silent, but this time, it felt different. One of the younger product designers near the back whispered. That's why he's Sundar. Martin leaned forward, tapping the table slowly. You know, he said, you might just be the most dangerous man in this room. Sundar smiled, but said nothing. But the quiet victory didn't last long, just as the meeting began to wrap up. A buzz went through the room. One of the executive assistants rushed in with a laptop and whispered something to the head of investor relations. Everyone noticed the shift in energy. The assistant handed over the laptop. The executive frowned, then turned it toward the table. You all need to see this. She said. On the screen was a news alert. A competing tech company had just leaked a prototype of a revolutionary mobile platform. Something shockingly similar to Sundar's vision, only flashier, faster, and apparently ready to launch within weeks. Gasps filled the room. Martin leaned forward, looking straight at Sundar. Well then, he said, with an edge. Seems like someone else had the same idea. But they moved quicker. The tension was instant. The investors began murmuring. Some executives looked panicked. A few even glanced at Sundar with a mixture of blame and fear. Was the strategy now obsolete? Had Sundar's vision been overtaken? In real time, Sundar stared at the screen. He didn't blink. He didn't speak. He simply closed his notebook, and then he stood up. Schedule an emergency strategy session. He said calmly, we'll pivot. The room went silent. You're not going to fight it? Martin asked. Sundar shook his head. I'm not here to fight for pride, he said. I'm here to build what matters. And I already saw this coming. He walked toward the exit, but just as he reached the door, he stopped, turned, and said something that no one forgot. They may have built the frame, he said, but we have the blueprint. And then he walked out, leaving behind a room full of stunned silence. And one investor who, for the first time, didn't know what to say. Asterisk, the leaked room was still buzzing, even an hour after Sundar left. People whispered in corners, checking their phones for more updates about the rival company's announcement. The headlines had already exploded across tech blogs and news sites. Titan Corp unveils mobile O's of the future. Google caught off guard. Sundar Pichai's vision under fire. Meanwhile, Sundar was already 2 floors below, seated quietly in a small glass-walled innovation room. The space was simple, just a whiteboard, a long table, and 5 carefully selected team members he had trusted over the years. There were no senior executives in this room, just builders, dreamers, people who didn't care about headlines but cared about what came next. We knew this might happen. Sundar began, his voice even. We've been building toward something bigger than the industry expects. They may have shown their hand first, but they don't know what we've kept close. Sarah, a software engineer with a reputation for brilliance and bluntness, leaned forward. If you're talking about Project Helios, we've only scratched the surface. And we're behind on testing. That's why we're here, Sundar said. We won't rush, but we won't hesitate either. He stood and moved to the whiteboard, uncapping a marker. Helios isn't just an operating system, he said, sketching out 3 connected circles. It's a learning platform, a dynamic infrastructure that adapts in real time, not just to user behavior, but to global conditions. Imagine an OS that rewrites itself based on energy efficiency needs, that changes interface design based on literacy levels, or that optimizes bandwidth in low connectivity zones. The room leaned in. We've been testing it in small markets, Sundar continued, drawing a line across India, South Africa, and rural parts of South America. Pilot programs, disguised as beta updates. Most users don't even know they're interacting with Helios, but the data shows something clear is working. Jerome, a data scientist in his 30s, looked skeptical. But how do we go public with this now? The world thinks Titan Corp just redefined this space. Because, Sundar said, looking up, they've built something exciting, but it's still made for people who already have access. Helios is built for the billions who don't. The room went silent for a beat, but then something happened. That shifted everything. Sarah single quotes as phone buzzed. She glanced at it, froze, then slowly turned the screen towards Sundar. A major tech news account had just tweeted. Rumors suggest Google has a secret project called Helios that could outmatch Titan Corp's platform. Inside sources claim it's already being tested. Every eye turned to Sundar. Inside sources. Jerome said, confused. Who else knows about this? Asked Maria, a systems architect who had worked with Sundar for over a decade. Sundar's face didn't change, but his voice dropped. Only the six of us. A heavy silence fell across the room. Someone had talked. We don't need to panic, Sundar said. But we do need to find out who leaked it and why. He tapped the whiteboard twice, then erased part of the diagram. This leak changes things, he said. They'll be watching us now, which means we pivot again. No more internal, only testing. It's time to accelerate. Bring in the next wave of engineers, but only under NDA. No cloud backups. Everything is local. We keep Helios air-gapped until we're ready. Jerome frowned. But going dark means losing collaboration speed. And going public before we're ready means losing the mission, Sundar said, with firm resolve. This isn't about winning headlines. It's about changing lives. But even as they spoke, the storm outside that room was growing louder. Board members were calling emergency meetings. Shareholders were nervous. Media outlets began speculating whether Sundar had lost control. Titan Corp CEO was already making rounds on major networks, bragging about innovation and dominance. And in the middle of it all, Martin Hale, the very investor who had once laughed in Sundar's face, who was gaining influence inside the company. After the leak about Helios, he positioned himself as the voice of urgency. He began pressuring the board to demand results fast. Immediate demos, press events, even licensing talks. We can't let Sundar keep us in stealth mode forever. Martin said to a group of top-level executives over lunch. This is the kind of moment you either dominate or you disappear. Back in the war room, Sundar was still calm. His calmness wasn't passive, it was calculated. He had dealt with storms before. Rejection at earlier jobs. Skepticism when Android was first proposed. Ridicule when Chromebooks were launched. Every time, he had been patient. Not because he lacked ambition, but because he understood timing better than anyone else. Still. The leak stung, not because it exposed a product, but because it betrayed trust. And Sundar took trust very seriously. I want everyone's devices scanned. Sundar told the internal security team that evening. Not for punishment, for clarity. They nodded, no one argued. Sundar never raised his voice, but when he made a request, people moved. Meanwhile, a young intern named Kevin, who had been assigned to sit in on the earlier board meeting and transcribe notes, sat alone on a bench outside, looking nervous. His hands trembled as he opened his phone and reread a message he should have deleted. One small tip can earn you a fortune. Tell me what pichai is hiding. Guaranteed anonymity. It had come from a journalist with ties to Titan Corp. And in a moment of weakness, maybe fear, maybe ambition, Kevin had replied with a vague sentence. Ask about Project Helios. He didn't think it would blow up. He thought it would be background noise. Maybe even ignored. But now, the whole company was shifting because of one text. Kevin's guilt was a storm inside him. He considered confessing. But the fear of losing. Everything froze him. He had student loans, a sick mother. And this internship was his chance at something better. So he stayed silent. But secrets have a way of rising. The next morning, Sundar received the report from internal security. Only one device had shown outgoing encrypted communication to an unknown contact shortly before the leak. Kevin single quotes S. Sundar stared at the name on the report for a long time. Then he quietly folded the page and set it aside. He didn't tell the team. He didn't fire Kevin. Instead, he asked his assistant to arrange a one-on-one lunch later that day. Kevin arrived at a quiet corner table in the campus cafe, visibly shaking. Sundar greeted him with a gentle smile and no trace of anger. "Kevin," he said, "how's your mother doing?" Kevin blinked, completely caught off guard. She's still in treatment. "Thank you for asking." Sundar nodded. "I lost someone close to me during my early days at Google. Back then, I used to wonder if I was in the wrong place, chasing the wrong dream." Kevin's throat tightened. Sundar leaned forward, his eyes soft but steady. "We all make choices," he said. "Some of them we're proud of, some not so much. But the real test is what we do after." Kevin looked down, tears gathering. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't think they would go this far." Sundar didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. "You have two options," Sundar said. "You can disappear quietly and no one will know. Or you can stay, work harder than you've ever worked and help fix what's been broken." Kevin looked up, stunned. You're not firing me?" "Mistakes don't define people," Sundar said. "How they rise afterward does." Kevin nodded slowly. "I'll stay, and I'll earn this." Sundar smiled again. "Then let's begin." But just as Kevin left the table with a renewed sense of purpose, Sundar's phone vibrated. It was a message from his assistant, Martin Halle. Is demanding a company-wide demo of Helios in front of the full board, scheduled for 3 days from now. Sundar looked out the window. 3 days. The countdown had begun. And the next move would determine everything. Asterisk. The trap in the boardroom, tension in the Google headquarters, was no longer something subtle. You felt in whispers or passing glances. It was thick, heavy, and present in every corner. It buzzed through the air like static, clung to walls like shadows, and followed everyone around like an invisible storm cloud. Sundar Pichai walked calmly through it, unshaken, as if he alone saw through the fog. But deep within him, he knew this next board meeting wouldn't be routine. It was a test. And this time, someone wanted him to fail publicly. As he entered the elevator that morning, heading toward the boardroom on the 28th floor, his mind wasn't racing, it was focused. Every second of the past 3 days had been poured into preparing not just a response, but a revelation. Something no one expected. Not even Martin Halle. But Martin, of course, had plans of his own, while Sundar had been meeting with engineers, refining the Helios demo and ensuring security after the leak. Martin had been lobbying quietly in the background. He wasn't trying to take Sundar's position, at least not yet. What he wanted was control. He wanted the board's trust, influence over the company's next steps. And a piece of Helios, before it became a global phenomenon, he had arranged private dinners with key board members, whispering doubts about Sundar's cautious nature. He had compiled a document of failed product launches, not just at Google, but across Alphabet's subsidiaries, and hinted that the company needed bolder leadership. He'd planted the idea that Sundar, though brilliant, might be too humble to face the aggressive market emerging from Titan Corp's announcement. Martin didn't plan to oust Sundar. He planned to neuter his control. And today he would strike. Inside the boardroom, everything looked polished and perfect. A long table of dark wood, a massive screen behind it, and chairs filled with people whose decisions could shape the company's future. Each board member had a tablet in front of them with preloaded materials. Some flipped through them casually. Others stared ahead, waiting for the moment to unfold. Martin was already seated near the center, crisp in his suit, smiling politely at everyone who walked in. To the casual eye, he looked professional, prepared, maybe even supportive. Sundar entered last. He wore no suit, just a simple collared shirt and a quiet expression. He greeted everyone individually by name, with warmth, and sat down at the head of the table. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "As you know, we've had an unexpected development over the past few days. Someone chuckled quietly, breaking the tension. But Sundar didn't flinch. Double quotes today. We're going to walk you through Project Helios, where it is, where it's going, and why it matters more now than ever before. He gestured subtly, and the lights dimmed slightly. A high-resolution presentation appeared on the screen behind him, not flashy, not overproduced. Clean lines, clear points, simple visuals. Helios isn't a product, Sundar said. It's a shift in how we think about access. Then he began the demo. At first, the board watched politely, nodding occasionally, asking light questions. The interface was slick, yes, but that wasn't what impressed them. What impressed them was the depth. As Sundar navigated through Helios, he showed how the system auto-adapted to a user's environment. When connectivity dropped below 2 grams. Helios compressed images and removed animations to save data. When battery power dipped below 20%, the system rerouted app behavior to maximize usage without needing user input. When the operating system detected elderly users with limited vision, it restructured app icons and magnified text without requiring extra setup. Sundar wasn't showing bells and whistles. He was showing thoughtfulness. We've tested this in more than 40 regions, he explained. From remote villages in India to low-income neighborhoods in the US, what we found is that people aren't looking for more features. They're looking for stability, simplicity, dignity. The room quieted. Even Martin, for a moment, said nothing. But just as the demo reached its peak, a live simulation from a test market in Kenya, the screen flickered. Then glitched. A sharp error message filled the board's screen. System failure. Security breach detected. Gasps rippled through the room. This wasn't part of the plan, was it? One board member asked. No, Sundar said, his voice calm but slightly more alert now. A technician rushed into the room. He looked rattled, holding a small tablet, whispering urgently into the ear of one of Sundar's aides. Sundar stood up and addressed the board. Please give us 5 minutes, he said. We'll fix this immediately. As the technician scrambled, Martin leaned forward, shaking his head. This is exactly what I feared, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. We're showcasing an unfinished product. And worse, it's vulnerable. We don't know that yet. A quiet voice said from the corner. It was Estelle, one of the longest-serving board members. Respected, sharp, often silent but deeply. Observant. Martin smiled but didn't retreat. Respectfully, Estelle, this is a global company. We can't afford to present broken tech to our investors or the world. Just then the technician returned, visibly pale. He leaned into Sundar's ear and whispered, Sure, it wasn't a bug. It was triggered manually. Someone installed a hidden line of code last night. Sundar nodded slowly. He wasn't shocked. Not really. He turned back to the board. Ladies and gentlemen, he said softly, someone tried to sabotage the demo. Not a malfunction, a deliberate insertion. Gasps again. Do you know who? Asked Estelle. Sundar paused. Looked around the room. Then he picked up a small remote from the table and tapped it. The screen flickered again, this time showing a recorded security feed from the Helios development server room. A lone figure entered at 2:11. A .m used a keycard. Moved to the server. Pause. Then typed something on a terminal. The image wasn't crystal clear, but it was clear enough. The room turned toward Martin Hawley. His face tightened. You're accusing me of what? He asked, eyes wide. Not accusing, Sundar said gently. I'm showing. Someone gasped as Martin's voice was heard faintly on the security audio. Just a nudge, just enough to buy time. The room turned electric. Martin stood abruptly, trying to recover. This is outrageous, he snapped. I was protecting the company. I didn't destroy anything. I made sure this meeting didn't turn into a disaster. You created the disaster, Estelle said sharply. Sundar remained seated. You tried to prove me weak, he said softly. You tried to control the narrative. The board murmured among themselves. Some were clearly horrified. Others silently. Ashamed for having believed in Martin's pitch over the past week, Estelle stood. Mr. Hawley, she said, please leave this room and consider your future relationship with this board under review. Martin stared, frozen, then slowly walked out without another word. As the door shut behind him, the tension broke. It didn't disappear, but it shifted. And now, all eyes returned to Sundar. We'll resume the demo, he said. The system's back online, and we'll walk you through the full capabilities. No more interruptions. And he did for the next 30 minutes. Sundar delivered one of the most precise, visionary, and emotionally compelling walkthroughs in the company's history. When he finished, no one clapped. Not because they weren't impressed, but because they were stunned. And yet, just as the room began to relax, another surprise awaited. A soft knock on the boardroom door. The assistant stepped in. Mr. Pichai, she said, there's someone here to see you. He says it's urgent. Who is it? Sundar asked. The assistant hesitated. He says, he's your father. The boardroom froze. Sundar blinked, stunned. He hadn't spoken to his father in almost 2 years. What could have brought him here today of all days? The memory in his father's eyes, hallway outside the boardroom, stretched long and quiet. As if time had slowed for a reason Sundar couldn't yet understand. The echo of his footsteps seemed louder than usual, each one falling heavier than the last. The tension of the meeting still lingered on his shoulders, yet now a different weight pressed on his chest, a personal one. His father, here, unannounced. After 2 long years of silence. When he turned the corner, there the man stood, tall but older now, more bent than Sundar remembered, dressed in simple clothes that looked out of place against the sleek glass and steel of Google's headquarters. Vijay Pichai held his hands in front of him, not nervously, but with the kind of deliberate stillness that only came from a lifetime of restraint. Appa? Sundar whispered, barely audible. Vijay looked up, and for a moment, neither spoke. They simply stared at each other, caught in the strange web of unspoken emotions that hung between estranged parents and children. Then his father nodded. Not a warm gesture, not cold either. Just respectful. Distant, but respectful. May we talk? Vijay asked, his voice still firm despite his age. Sundar nodded slowly and gestured toward a nearby private lounge. Once inside, the door closed, with a soft click behind them, sealing away the chaos of the corporate world just beyond. The room was minimalist. 2 leather chairs facing a coffee table, warm lighting, and a wall of green plants meant to give the illusion of calm. They sat across from each other, still silent. It was Vijay who finally broke it. I saw the broadcast, he said simply. Sundar looked up. You watched the demo? His father nodded again. Yes, and the sabotage. Sundar waited. He didn't know what was coming. Praise had never flowed freely from his father. Neither had open emotion. I remember, Vijay continued, when you were 10, and we couldn't afford a textbook on microprocessors. You copied entire chapters by hand at the local library. A memory flickered to life in Sundar's mind. The old library bench. The flickering bulb, his cramping fingers, and his father standing by the door, waiting patiently, never once rushing. You were obsessed, Vijay said. But I thought you were dreaming too big. Sundar smiled faintly, eyes distant. You told me I should study mechanical engineering, something practical. I was wrong, Vijay said. The words landed like a stone thrown into still water. Sundar Quotet's head lifted, surprise flashing across his face. I didn't understand then, Vijay said, his voice quieter now. Not the computers, not the world you saw through them. I came from scarcity, from survival. I raised you to protect yourself, not to dream. But watching you today. He paused, eyes glistening. Double quotes. Watching you today reminded me that some risks are worth it. For a moment, Sundar didn't speak. There was a lump in his throat he hadn't felt in years. Not since he had walked alone to his first job interview. In America, carrying just a folder, a cheap pen, and his father's old wristwatch in his pocket. Why now? Sundar asked quietly. Vijay took something from his bag, a folded, worn envelope. He handed it across the table. Your mother kept every article about you, every photo, every award. When she passed last year, I couldn't look at them anymore. Not because I wasn't proud, but because I didn't know how to say I was sorry. Sundar opened the envelope. Inside were clippings, all yellowed with time. A picture of him at Stanford, his first patent filing. A printed out article headlined "The Quiet Indian Mind Behind Android's Rise." His breath caught. I'm not here for attention, Vijay added. I'm here because I don't want the last thing I ever said to you to be careful. Sundar set the papers down and looked at his father with different eyes now. Eyes that saw not just the stubborn man who once doubted him, but the quiet protector who, in his own way, had always wanted his son to be safe. I've missed you, Sundar said, voice trembling. His father nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Then, finally, he reached across the table and placed his hand on Sundar's. So have I? They sat there for a while, neither saying much. But everything important already said. But peace rarely lasts in a world spinning as fast as Sundar's thought an hour later. Just as he returned to his office, his head of legal affairs was waiting at the door. She looked pale, holding a folder marked urgent. Sundar, she said, stepping inside with him. We've got a problem. It's not just about the sabotage. Sundar tensed. Go on. She opened the folder and spread out several printouts internal. Memos, email exchanges, and redacted contracts. It appears Martin had been trying to initiate talks with Titan Corp about sharing segments of our AI framework without approval. He was trying to license our proprietary tech. Sundar asked, disbelief flickering. More than that, she said. He was negotiating behind your back. If the board had voted to limit your role, he would have used that leverage to cut a deal and profit personally. Sundar closed his eyes for a moment. He wasn't angry. He was disappointed. Not just in Martin, but in the vulnerability of the system he had built. Too much trust. Not enough safeguards. Is this enough to bring formal charges? He asked. Yes, she said. But that's not the issue. Sundar looked up. The issue is that if this becomes public now, it may hurt Google more than it hurts Martin. Trust is fragile. Shareholders panic. The media doesn't care who's right, they just want a story. Sundar nodded slowly, digesting every word. Then we don't release it, he said finally. We don't? She asked. Confused. Not yet, he said. Not until we've built enough value around Helios that no one can question who's in charge or why. She nodded, still uncertain, but trusting him. Sundar stared out the window. Eyes distant. Helios was more than a platform now. It was a statement. And the time to launch was closer than ever. Meanwhile, deep in an underground server room, engineers were finalizing the last stage of Helios Adaptive Engine. Data streamed across 10 screens, lines of code alive with intention. One of the senior devs turned to Kevin, now fully integrated into the core team. You ready to push the final build? He asked. Kevin nodded, determination burning in his chest. Let's do this. But just before the final sequence executed, a red alert flashed. Suspicious access request detected, remote terminal attempt blocked. Everyone froze. Kevin rushed over. Someone's still trying to break in. The engineer's fingers flew across the keyboard. IP address blocked, but this wasn't from outside. Kevin's stomach dropped. Then it's someone still inside. Just as he spoke those words, a message appeared on the screen. No name. No sender. Just 3 chilling words. Helios must fall. Asterisk shadows inside the firewall. Lights in the Helios development wing flickered as tension surged, with the red flashing text still glowing on every screen. Helios must fall. The words weren't just digital graffiti. They were a declaration, a threat. Not from an outsider, but from someone still within the walls. Someone who knew the system, who had access, and who wanted everything to collapse from the inside. Kevin stood frozen, his eyes locked on the monitor. Beside him, senior engineer Anita tried to trace the attempted breach, typing furiously, her voice sharp and low. They came in through a dummy port, used a secondary protocol reserved for sandbox testing. Only a handful of people even know that port exists. How many people, exactly? Kevin asked, swallowing the dread rising in his throat. Anita's fingers paused. Less than 10. Outside the room, footsteps echoed and the hallway rushed, uneven. Sundar Pichai entered a moment later, calm on the outside but carrying the storm in his eyes. He took in the scene at a glance. The alert, the frozen faces, the silence. What happened? He asked. Anita stepped forward. Someone inside is trying to destroy Helios. They didn't just try to breach it, they attempted to inject code that would corrupt the adaptive engine permanently. We stopped it just in time. But, Sundar pressed. We can't be sure they won't try again. And if they succeed next time, the entire platform could become unusable. The room sank into silence again, broken only by the whirring of machines. Trace the access logs, Sundar ordered. Pull every keystroke, every login, every movement inside this building for the past 48 hours. Start with the list of people who know the sandbox port. Anita nodded and began. The digital dragnet. Kevin joined her, eyes darting across lines of code and access logs, trying to ignore the pulsing guilt that still haunted him from his previous mistake. Meanwhile, Sundar stepped out into the hallway and made a call to the internal crisis response. Team, we're activating Tier 4 protocol, he said quietly. Limited clearance, no external connections. Until this is resolved, Helios is locked down. On the other end, the voice responded instantly. Understood. Beginning lockdown now. Inside the boardroom, however, rumors were spreading fast. Some executives who hadn't been present during the demo failure began whispering about instability. A few questioned whether the sabotage incident had been exaggerated to cover up flaws in Helios. Others, influenced by Martin's lingering poison, speculated that the platform was too ambitious to succeed at all. Sundar knew this. He could feel the undercurrent of doubt gaining momentum. He had seen it before in people's eyes, when he first proposed a free mobile OS for low-cost phones. When he pushed for Chrome despite criticisms that no one needed another browser. Every time the doubts came. But this time was different. This time, the enemy wasn't outside. It was here, watching, waiting, deep into the night, while the campus. Lights dimmed and most offices emptied out. Sundar remained in the strategy room, reviewing files. His father had gone back to the hotel after their emotional conversation, promising to attend the launch event once Helios went public. But Sundar couldn't afford to dwell on that right now. His focus had narrowed. Just then, a quiet knock on the door. It was Estelle, the board member with the sharp eyes and sharper memory. I know it's late, she said, stepping inside, but I thought you should see this. She handed him a tablet with a video clip. Surveillance footage, she added, from the stairwell near Helios Labs. About an hour before the breach attempt. Sundar tapped play. The footage showed a figure in a hoodie, face obscured, entering through a back stairwell using a secondary access card. Enhanced the badge. Sundar said. The camera zoomed. And froze. The name read, S. Vatiri Anita's full name, Anita Vaziri. Sundar leaned back in his chair, his heart sinking. No, it can't be her. Estelle crossed her arms. You trust her? With my life? Sundar said. Then you should ask why her access card was cloned. The air in the room turned cold. Cloned. Not used directly. Not stolen. Copied, which meant the saboteur had gotten close enough to one of Sundar's most trusted engineers to create a ghost key. EIRD. Sundar stood suddenly. Get Kevin. Now, he said. Moments later, Kevin arrived, eyes wide. You said you helped Anita last week. With badge issues? Sundar asked. Kevin nodded. Yeah. She had trouble getting into one of the restricted labs. I walked her down to facilities. Handed the badge to the guy at the security desk. Did you stay with it the whole time? Kevin's face paled. No. I left it on the counter when he went in the back room. Figured he was just reprogramming it. Sundar closed his eyes for a second. Not in anger, but to think. We're dealing with someone who knew exactly where to strike. And when someone watching us from the inside, or from just close enough, he turned to Estelle. We need to delay the internal launch. If we delay, we lose investor confidence, she warned. And if we launch with a corrupt engine, we lose everything, Sundar replied. She sighed, nodding. I'll handle the board. Just then, Anita stormed into the room. Someone cloned my access, she said breathlessly. They've been in my files. My personal drive had fragments of deleted code. Someone tried to frame me for the breach. No, Sundar said. But now we know they're running out of time. And that means they'll make a mistake soon. Hours later, Kevin was poring through backup server activity logs when he noticed something odd. A packet of test data had been rerouted through an unused internal network. This shouldn't be active, he muttered. He followed the trail. Then stopped. The access was coming from an IP address assigned to someone who had left the company 6 months ago. Elena Romanoff. Former cloud infrastructures. Quiet. Brilliant. And after a series of disciplinary reports, quietly let go without much fanfare. She had vanished, but her login credentials were alive. And used. Kevin ran to Sundar. It's Elena, he said. She's not just trying to destroy Helios. She's been watching us build it from the outside this whole time, and she has helped. Sundar took a deep breath. Who helped her get access? Kevin hesitated. Someone from the Titan Corp acquisition team used to work with her. In Europe? She might have been planted months ago. We missed it. The pieces clicked into place. The leak, the time sabotage, the fake access badge, all part of a long game. She's probably been selling our internal architecture to Titan Corp. Sundar sighed quietly, waiting for the right moment to shut us down completely. So, what now? Kevin asked. Shaken. Sundar looked him in the eye. We go public. Tomorrow. Kevin blinked. But we haven't completed internal threat resolution. Exactly. Sundar interrupted. They expect us to hide. To delay? But we're flipping the table? How? By launching a closed beta of Helios. Live. Kevin's eyes widened. That's a huge risk. So is trusting the wrong people, Sundar said. But this is faith in the right ones. He stood and issued the order. Tell the team to prep a public-facing beta. 3 time zones. Minimum feature set. We launch at noon tomorrow. That night, Sundar stood on the rooftop of the Google campus, looking over the city lights. Behind him, the engineers worked in silence. Below, security patrolled the premises tighter than ever. Somewhere out there, Elena Romanoff was watching. But tomorrow, she would see something she never expected. Resilience. The kind that couldn't be bought. Broken, or bullied. As Sundar walked back inside, his phone buzzed. A message from his father. I'll be there tomorrow, and no matter what happens, you've already made me proud. Sundar smiled. The war wasn't over, but the battlefield was set. Asterisk. The last move. Sun rose over Silicon Valley, like a spotlight piercing through the fog of uncertainty. Inside Google's campus, every corridor buzzed, not with fear, but with focus. Coffee cups trembled in the hands of engineers. Screens flickered under the pressure of final tests. The launch countdown ticked lower with each heartbeat. It wasn't just another beta rollout. It was a reckoning. Helios, the platform born from Sundar Pichai's quiet vision, was about to step into the light, unfinished, exposed, vulnerable. And he was letting it. In the past, launches were polished and rehearsed. Today, Sundar was choosing transparency, choosing trust. And the world was watching. The internal servers had been locked down, the threat vectors traced and secured. But the saboteur, Elena Romanoff, remained at large and seen, but not forgotten. Kevin, Anita, and the others had combed through every line of code, every authentication path, and removed every ghost entry they could find. But one chilling truth remained. If Elena had embedded a final payload, they wouldn't know until Helios went live. Sundar understood the risk. But he also understood something deeper. Greatness wasn't born in safety. It was forged in Faith Dot at 11:57 a.m. The digital press room was full. Journalists logged in from 5 continents. Tech insiders filled livestream chat rooms. Investors refreshed dashboards. Titan Corp's name trended next to Google's, the world holding its collective breath to see who would emerge ahead. The clock struck noon. A single message appeared across all screens. Welcome to Helios Beta for everyone, everywhere. The platform came to life. Users in India, Kenya, and Brazil, 3 test regions chosen for their diverse challenges, received the first updates. Within seconds, Helios began adapting.